Hello and welcome to the Jewelers Academy podcast. My name is Anna Campbell and I am your host this week. And I'm very excited to be joined by Nicola McMillan. Nicola is a specialist in branding and web design and the founder of NM Create, specializing in branding that actually converts for small business owners. She does a range of things, including her VIP design intensive, and won the Creative Hero Award last year in the Small Business Heroes Awards. Yay! She's also just started the Design VA to take design tasks from business owners to help them free up their time. And I work with Nicola myself on the branding for the Good Girl Rebellion. And I just love how she made my ideas all come together to create my brand identity. So welcome. I'm so glad we get a chance to have a chat on the podcast too.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me on. Yeah.
And, there were so many things, obviously, with your background in branding, in web design, in all kinds of design. We were trying to think of what would be the best topic for us to
Yeah.
cover.
There's a lot.
Um,
There's a lot to cover.
There is a lot. There is a lot. And in a short podcast, we don't have time to cover all of your amazing expertise. But I think maybe what we thought would be helpful and relevant for everyone listening is the 5 mistakes that businesses make with their branding, but also more importantly, how do we fix them?
Yeah,
Because I'm
yeah.
sure lots of people kind of can relate to not really being sure what to do with their branding and kind of scrabbling around a little bit around
Yeah,
it. So
yeah. I think especially when you're doing it yourself and everybody's been in that place when they're just starting a business and you do you do try and do as much as you can yourself to get going. So maybe a lot of people won't realize that it's not that they're making mistakes. I'm not going to bash anyone, but it's like things that can really make such a difference to their business when they're trying to grow, make more sales, get more eyes on their content. So yeah, I think going over these kind of 5 things will be really helpful for a lot of your listeners.
yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of people, people will be in different places in the journey in terms of
Yeah,
having a business. Maybe they're just thinking of starting a business and they're looking at this side of things.
yeah,
Maybe they're, a little bit further along. Perhaps they've DIY'd a logo and they've DIY'd it and now they know, okay, I need to step this up and I
take that
need to
one.
take this
Yeah, yeah,
somewhere. And
definitely.
also, I think it's, even if you're a more established business, it's really good to just look at that and refresh the branding and think
Mhm.
about that too.
Yeah,
So I think whatever stage you're at, this is going to be a good conversation
yeah.
to listen to, definitely. Um, well, let me start. What do we mean by branding? What does
So
that mean?
a lot of people again will think branding is, what's their logo and what all their visuals look like, but that's kind of like the cherry on the top. So that's the bit that everyone sees, but what actually really matters is under the hood. So it's in your brand foundations. What are your values when it comes to being that business? um Knowing your audience really well. Like, there's lots of businesses that can serve a huge array of different audiences. But if you could have one absolutely perfect customer and have 20 of them, what would that person look like? Because once you get into the nitty gritty of that, your marketing becomes so much easier. Your messaging, you kind of know exactly what to say, what kind of voice to have, what your brand personality is. So, like, if your business was in a room with other businesses, how would it interact? What would its persona be like? And that's what we mean by brand personality. So when you kind of pull all of these things together, including your analyzing your direct competitors, you can then go, well, actually, there's a bit here that's like nobody's tapped into, and I could fit right in here. And when you do that, and then you start building on the visuals for the branding, the logo, patterns, logo marks, colors, fonts, all of these things together can make a massive impact on bringing in your ideal audience, making more money, making more sales, and that kind of thing. So that's like a very short explanation of what branding is, but it's really big. It's a big project. Like, obviously me and you worked on it. And when you start looking at all these little different things, right down to me saying to you, here are some color palettes that would work really well with all of that like ticked off, it can be really, really impactful. And you kind of want your branding to be unforgettable. You want people to remember it because they're going to become your biggest cheerleaders.
I think that is so true. And I think as well, we're talking particularly, I mean, this could be for anyone in small business, really, but we're talking particularly to jewelers here. And I think what's interesting is that, as jewelers, we tend to be quite visual people. We are quite good at that. But I was at a conference. I don't know if you were at the same conference, actually. Did you go to Atomicon?
I didn't. I never made it this year.
Okay.
Next year.
Sorry.
Next year.
An aside there. But anyway, there was this funny moment on stage where a graphic designer was talking, and he was like, "Look, you guys are not graphic designers." He's like, "Some of you guys, you are really, really not graphic designers." And I thought it was just really funny because I think sometimes. And I think this can be a women thing as well. It's like we just try and just do it all. It's
Yes.
like, yeah. And I think when we're doing our own business and we're starting our own business, we kind of feel like we have to kind of do all of the different things. And yes, perhaps we just DIY a little logo in Canva and just get started. And I think sometimes we can get ourselves too stuck on certain things and we don't get started. So I think there's that too. But one of the things I valued about working with you is, having that kind of structure, but really kind of getting into all of that. Like who is this for? What are we trying to kind of put across in branding? And I think that was such a brilliant experience to have. But yeah, let's get into these mistakes that we make. What's the first one that somebody might make?
So the first one would be appealing to everybody. So when you appeal to everyone, you kind of please no one because you're not really, it's too broad. And when you attempt to create a brand that speaks to absolutely every customer, it just kind of gets lost in the haziness of things. There's nothing really that goes, that's me. I'm going to buy from that person. I really like what they're doing or what they're selling. So when you try and connect with everyone and you connect, essentially you end up connecting with no one. Your branding becomes a bit bland, a bit forgettable. It doesn't really spark the kind of real emotion or the real connection that you have with your customers. And the best way to fix that is to really get to know your customers. And I don't just mean male or female, age bracket to age bracket. I'm talking about like creating a full client avatar. What are their likes? What are their dislikes? What is their family situation? What's their income situation? Where do they hang about? Where do they go on holiday? Do they read? Are they into magazines? Are they into fashion? Are like what is it that really makes them tick? And then you can start to develop a brand voice that really resonates with that audience, the way you talk, the way you kind of handle yourself, the way your business stands out. And if you can do that and be the absolute perfect fit for 20% of your absolutely all of your audience, it's better to have that and aim for those customers than a mediocre option for all of your customers. And I've been through this myself. So I have worked with everybody, and then I started niching down and niching down, niching down. Now I'm in a little bubble, and it just works. And I know how to speak to them. I get it. Like I get what they're all about in business. And when we worked together, your voice was really clear. Like I loved your copy, your website, and I said that to you at the time. So we already had a really good idea of who your audience was, and also what your voice sounded like. It was bold, it was powerful, it was to the point, there was no fluff. So when it came to the branding side of it, and we knew how to really appeal to that audience. So that's tip number one. Don't appeal to everyone. Work on your absolute ideal customer. And you might have one or two. It's okay to have a couple, but don't have everybody because it just gets lost. Becomes very, very hazy. We don't want that.
Yeah. I think that's such a great point. And I think when it comes to jewelers, a lot of us also talk about like our own signature style in terms of our jewelry making. And that could be around a certain materials that we use, or and that can take time to develop. When we're learning jewelry making, we're just kind of copying our teachers to start with, and then we're starting to develop, like, what is it that I want to make, what relates to who I am and where I am right now. But that's kind of part of the journey, and that's what's quite exciting about it. And that's what I think, what I love about this whole thing about branding is, well, your side of things is around the web and the visuals, as it were. All of this feeds into other things, like how you show up on Instagram or socials or whatever as well. I think that, when it feels cohesive, I think that's when things kind of take off a bit more, don't they?
They do, yeah. Like when you've got a really cohesive brand, like, so for example, a lot of the people that will be listening have their own business, and they might be at that stage where they're still figuring things out. But what I would say to them is, have a think about a brand you buy from. What's your experience going on their website, making a purchase? What is the delivery like? What is their packaging like? Like, I've had, my absolute favourite was at Christmas. I ordered a gift card for my goddaughter, and I'd never shopped on this website before. I just knew she wanted a gift card, went on and ordered it, and it came in this incredible box, and I was blown away. And I've told this story so many times now, but the packaging and the way it was presented absolutely blew my mind. That's part of their branding, is the experience that the customer gets. And if you're into, this was a beauty site, if you're into all of that, I can guarantee you, if you receive that as a standard delivery, you're going to shop there again, because it was just really easy to order. It was really minimal. It was really easy to get that part done. The delivery was straightforward, but what blew my mind was the packaging. I was honestly, so that's part of the cohesiveness. So you go on this website, it has a particular feel, it has a particular like stance in the beauty industry, but what really sold it was what I received. And sometimes I love a delivery. Like, I love a delivery. So if someone can deliver something to me and it just adds to the customer experience, I am going to be a fan. Absolutely. I have got boxes and boxes and of like little bits that I've saved over the years, because I just love what their branding looks like, and I'll never use it again. But I just keep it for my own inspiration, because I'm like, that is spot on. So yeah, knowing your customer and really serving them that entire brand experience can just set things off really well.
I think that's so important, and I think as particularly for jewelers, where it is such a visual purchase, having that, having the brand identity all the way through, but then also thinking really carefully around the packaging and the details is such a big thing, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I love nothing more than working with a client on that entire process, because it doesn't just stop when you've got a logo. Once you've got that and you've got your brand foundations, it's like, right, well, where do I need to put that? What media does all this need to go on? And do I need to think about anything else? And for me, one of my big things would be, for the type of industry, like the jewelers, would be, make sure your online persona is like consistent everywhere. And then take that forward to think about, well, what do my customers get when they receive something from me? And how can I take that up a notch? Because it would just make all the difference. Trust me.
Right. Okay. So number 2, what is our second mistake, and what do we do about it?
So this actually moves really nicely on, is inconsistent visual branding. So when you use lots of different colours, lots of different fonts, and lots of different styles, it creates confusion and it undermines your professionalism and your credibility. So the audience who's looking at it will struggle to recognise and remember your brand, because it's a bit hodgepodge. It's a little bit here or there, all over the place. So my tips for avoiding all of that would be to have a comprehensive brand style guide. Now, if you work with a designer, you'll get one of these, and it will confirm all your colours, how to put them into Canva, how you use those colours for print, what fonts to use, and how to stay visually consistent. And the other things would be to make sure that you're using the same colors across all the different types of media: website, social media, stationery, business cards, packaging.
Book
Absolutely
covers.
the same. Yes. Get them. And choosing absolute like 2 3 fonts max. Because one of the mistakes I see quite often is I'll go on someone's social media and then I'll go to their website and I'm like, oh, that looks totally different. I'm on the right site. Then it causes the doubt. And then I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to order from them. You don't want to have that. Like, you want to make sure that when your customers are anywhere to do with your business, they're getting the same experience. Because again, you want to make sure you're credible, professional, and that they are going, this is a person I want to buy from. So if you can use the same the same colors across all platforms, choose 2 to 3 primary fonts and stick to them. Do not add more in there. And make sure that your imagery and your graphic styles are the same throughout as well. And what I mean by that is, say you're on Canva and you find a really nice picture that you want to use on a social media graphic, but then we go to your website and it's all really fun and casual, but the one you've put out on social media is a bit more formal. It just doesn't have the same consistency. And again, it makes people go, is this the same company? So you want to make sure if you're using things that are quite bright and out there or really classy, that it's the same type of imagery that's being used everywhere. And one of the really good things you can do if you're unsure about fonts and how to pick them, you can keep it really easy. And if you just go to Google and look for Google font pairings, it will match, it will show you pairings of titles and like paragraph fonts that you can use, and they're free to download from Google. And then, I mean, 9 times out of 10, they'll be on the likes of Canva, but you can then upload them into Canva. You can upload them onto your website. And again, it just starts to keep everything a bit consistent. So if you are doing it yourself, I highly recommend doing something like that, because you'll get a lot of help from just Google searches with the font pairings, because it'll give you, you know, ones that look really classy, ones that look really bold, and you can kind of narrow that down to suit whatever your style is. So
Mm.
yes, from inconsistency to consistency is point number 2.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And I think what then people sometimes think they need to do is kind of almost burn their old social media to the ground. It's like, don't worry about it. Like,
No,
nobody scrolls back anymore. You know,
yes,
like
yes,
you've got new
mm,
you've got new branding, like just start with it
yes,
and
just
just
go.
make sure, yeah, just go
Yeah,
with it. Because I think we can overthink that. I mean, we can underthink it too, but I think we can overthink it,
yes,
and get to a point where it's like, well, I'm going to have to get rid of everything that's gone before. But actually, I think that having that development goes to
mhm,
show that you're a business that I can trust, because you've
yeah,
been around long enough to have had a rebrand and had to rethink about
yes,
what you're doing. So yeah, so I think, yes, change your whole website, like that's yes, of
yeah,
course,
yeah.
you know,
I think
that's fine, but
yeah, I think when you're, if you do a rebrand and you're a bit like, oh, you know, this is going to look a bit inconsistent on the feed, you're right. We see 100% of everything that's on social media. Our customers don't. And sometimes we can get really tied in into what our feed looks like. I'm not fussed on having something that's, you know, quote, picture, quote. I don't do the grid thing. I just put out what content works, and making sure that it's branded and making sure people know my business name, my like handle for Instagram, all that kind of stuff. But when it is really consistent, again, it just raises your credibility and your professionalism. And
yes.
you're right, when you maybe look at a company and you can see it was maybe a bit neither here nor there to begin with, but then there's a change, they go, oh, you know, oh, I can see they've changed things a bit here. Oh, this looks really nice. And it just gives you that really nice feeling. And you'll do it yourself when you're a customer of a company. You'll see if there's a change. You're like, oh, I quite like what they're all about now. I like that they've stepped into this. Because most people, when they do a rebrand, you can see a huge shift in what they're trying to do with the business. And it is a bit more niche and it is a bit more defined and it's a little bit more, you know, out there. And it makes such a difference. That's what it
It
does.
does. And I think, you know, a few years ago, the idea of the very pretty grid where it had to look, when you looked at it, it had to look consistent the whole way through,
Yeah.
like you just said, of like, a reel and a quote and a reel and
Yeah.
a quote, that kind of thing. Luckily those days are gone, but
Yeah.
it's consistency in terms of you putting out that content, that
Yeah.
kind of imagery that relates to you,
Yeah.
and your logo and your branding and all of
Mhm.
that. That's what
Yeah.
we mean by consistency here. So I'm
Yeah.
glad you put that up. So
Yeah, so I think it's more about making sure that you're using the right colours, your logos here or there. If you've got lots of little like brand marks, so like little badges or little graphics, make sure they're dotted around across all of your different social media. Like my brand colour is the main one's raspberry, and I try and use it absolutely everywhere. But because I've done that, and because I wear a lot of headbands and I've got my pink glasses, people start to recognise me for these things now. And
yeah,
it just goes to show you, when you put out the consistency, people start to recognise you. I mean, I've had people come up to me at networking events like, "Oh, I've seen you on social media." I have no idea who these people are, but
yeah.
they've seen me. They know again, my face is all over my social media, and that my brand presence is so strong that when I go to a networking event, people will go, "Oh, there's Nicola. She runs that company and creates." So it does make a big difference when you're trying to be recognizable, like not just with the public, but around other business owners as well.
Definitely. And I think this kind of comes back to another thing that we talk about quite a lot at Jewelers Academy, and that is around when you are a handmade jeweler, this is what we do,
Mhm.
that your story is actually an important part of that
Yeah.
story. Yes, the
Yeah.
jewelry is important, but what people do is they'll say, "Oh, I bought jewelry from that jeweler who's based in Edinburgh and is inspired by this," and that's
Mhm.
that's what they're doing, rather than buying something from a high street brand. Or you
Yeah.
don't really want someone to say, "I bought some jewelry from Etsy." Like doesn't it doesn't
Yeah.
mean anything to you. It doesn't connect someone to you in that
Yeah.
way. So actually, I know sometimes people don't feel that confident with stepping forward, but I think your story is also part of your
Mhm.
personal brand, isn't it?
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
it's not so much, it's not so much around the visuals, but it is, because it needs to be consistent with you and who
Mhm.
you are
Yep.
as a person, and the kind of jewelry that you create and the kind of
Yes.
customer that you have. That's all part of the
It
story,
is.
isn't it?
Yeah. And that brings us really nicely on to point three, which is neglecting
Yay! I
brand
love
story.
all of this. Thank you.
So your brand story is, if you just treat your brand as a logo and some colours and there's nothing substantial there, that kind of loses the emotional connection with your customers. And if you can get that emotional connection in there, you are more likely to convert them into paying customers. And it takes casual lurkers into being your cheerleaders. Like, they will buy and tell everyone about you. So it's like, again, it's back into that, what's under the hood. What is the brand story? Like, so for me, I've been employed, I've been in some really horrible situations. I then quit and became my boss. So one of my things is to make sure everyone is treated really fairly. And I also believe that every business owner should have the chance to work with a brand designer without it costing you agency fees or, ridiculous price points. And that's not to take away from what that investment does when you invest in a brand designer. But because I'm so true to who I am and what I'm all about, I really connect with people who are at that point where, they're sick of playing small. They really want to turn things around. They're fed up kind of just, mixing into the rest of the crowd. They really want to make a stand. So I get that. I've been there. I've done it. I've walked the walk. So my brand story really helps me connect with potential customers. So how can you share your brand story? So storytelling strategies can be like sharing your own business journey. How did you get here? What hardships have you been through? How did you get out the other side? Or maybe not so much hardships, but what great things have happened throughout your journey. Tell people about all the exciting stuff. And also to be really vulnerable and authentic, because if people get a sniff that you're like acting, they're gonna hear that. They're gonna get that vibe, and it kind of makes them kind of step back and go, what's going on here? Um, Highlighting the personal mission behind the business, like what is it you're trying to do? And then connecting that personal why to your professional offerings and your services and your products. So if one of your biggest values is sustainability, you might want to put that across into a range of products that you're selling. There might be a particular material or way you do things. And if that takes you then back into your audience, if that's going to something that really matters to your audience, tap into that. Because if your competitors aren't doing it, that's going to then give you that edge. So hopefully you can start to see now that I'm starting to link all these little things together. But if you can tell and you don't have to make it like a big feature on social media or on your website or on your blog all the time or podcasts or whatever. You just have to be authentic and talk about these things. Again, it lets your customers get to know you because you are the person behind it. And see, if you are a creative person and people are working with you one-to-one, you want to make sure that you do actually gel really well, because it just makes the marketing side of it so much easier. So yeah, tip 3, don't neglect your brand story. And if you haven't really figured that out or done anything with it, have a think about an about page on your website, taking that onto carousel posts, reels, snippets all over social media, that kind of thing, because it will really help you to stand out among the crowd as well if they're not doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the about page is actually one of the most viewed pages. So once somebody goes to the home page, yes, they might be looking at the products, but a lot of times they are interested in who is this person? What do they do? What is there about them? And I can think of a few different jewelers who have picked on something specific around who they are. Maybe it's around a material or something that they use. Maybe it's like sea glass, or that
Yes.
they do that, or it's around like where they live and they're sharing a lot about what they do in that kind of way. Or maybe they've got a studio in their garden that they love, and they're sharing that. So there's something that you can kind of anchor that to, I think.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
a lot of times, I think what happens is that we don't see it ourselves. You almost have to
Yeah.
ask someone else, like,
Uh-huh.
what 3 words do you think of when you think of me? Or like, what is important about what I do? And I think that sometimes is a really great tip to
Yeah.
working out, what is that story? What is the thing that is the most memorable about me? Because you know everything about yourself. So how are you going
Yeah.
to pick that out? And I think the other thing, as you were talking, that came into my mind is that the more we have this, especially in this kind of all evolution of AI and things like that,
Mhm.
I think a lot of people are really wanting that authenticity. They
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
buy from a real person.
Yeah.
And people who are buying handmade jewelry, the price has to be higher. And that's fine. That's exactly as it should be.
Yeah.
And so that story and that connection and all of that becomes really important,
Yeah.
to be like, this piece of jewelry that I'm wearing was made by Jess from Homebed Jewelry. I have that story and I know who she is and I know what she does. And that is why I think that's also a really important point to
Yeah.
make. So,
Yeah. And I think if you can, because you're right, not everyone's going to have the same story into what they're doing, where they work from, what materials they work with, what they specialize in. So just to tap into that a little bit can really help your audience to go, oh yeah, I really love that. Yeah, I definitely would buy from this person. Or again, it could be the style of the products that's the big point, but where's the inspiration coming from? To tell your customers that, like, because personally, because I'm creative, I love to know about the people behind the businesses. And again, if I'm investing in my business and I want to put in, I'll go to the about page. I'll have a look. I'll go on their socials. I'll see what they're all about. I'll see how they talk. How is their persona? All these things matter to me. And I think once you really get to know your ideal audience and you know what matters to them, you'll then start to know what you should be like putting on these things to tell people about you and your brand story and stuff like that. Mhm.
absolutely fabulous. Right. So what's now? I've lost track of what number are we on. Are we on
We're on
4 or
number
5?
four. Number
4.
four.
4, right, great.
So number 4, and I don't know if this will really relate a lot to your audience on the podcast, because they probably do have a niche style, but one of the things is to not copy, instead of using that as innovation or inspiration. So mimicking competitors' branding instead of finding your own unique voice and style. So anyone starting out might look at other businesses and go, "Oh, I really love what they're doing, and I love how that sounds, and that's great." And then they kind of mimic that. And what that does is it just puts you on the steady, on like the same shelf as them, and it's kind of like, well, what makes you different? So finding your unique selling point can make a huge difference. Now, I've done this work when I changed my business model from design projects to VIP days. And I've done a lot of competitor analysis. So that's one of the things that you want to definitely do. Finding your uniqueness is like finding your superpower. Copies don't stand out, so you don't want to do that. Do proper competitor analysis. Now, that doesn't have to look like a huge in-depth spreadsheet. It literally could just be a spreadsheet with their name, their services, and what is it that makes them stand out? What are they doing really well? Like, what would make them go, that's quite unique? So taking that back to my story, I looked at quite a few competitors in the UK and close by as well. And there was one or two who were doing like, well, we can do your project in 7 days. And I was like, that's really they're the first person I've came across, but it was in amongst all these paragraphs. They hadn't really used it as a unique selling point. Like, it wasn't like here's what I can do for you in 7 days. And I was like, that's a shame. But although I knew I wanted to do VIP days, I wanted to do the transformation in a day. And when I'd done that, I was then able to identify gaps in the market that some of my competitors were like, I'm a brand designer, I'm a graphic designer, I can design logos. And I was kind of like, I don't want to sound like that. I don't want to be like that. So if you can then look at that, find your unique sort of little spots where you could step into it, and then you develop your own brand personality that makes you distinctly you. And that's the same for your business. If you can really distinct the business and embrace what makes you different, you're giving yourself that really unique point of difference. Again, it then makes people go, well, actually, I love what they do, because you are standing out and they're not having to choose you among, a bunch of other competitors. So stepping into your uniqueness is your superpower.
Yeah, definitely. And I think at its kind of height with jewelers is you can see a piece of jewelry and go, oh, I know who made that. Like,
Yes.
that's that kind of signature style side of
Yeah.
thing. But equally, I mean, I was talking about this on a call yesterday. As people, I think sometimes the word unique makes people freak out because it's a difficult one. We are all unique because we have
Yes.
come from the background that we have, and we're developing our skills in the way that we have, and we do the things that we do. And so I think as you say, picking out one thing of that, it's like, I'm unique because I'm making jewelry out of
Yeah.
these materials, and I'm doing this, and this is
Yes.
the story. It's all part and parcel of that of
Yes.
that thing, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if you can say, it's like when you go on a website and you look at, why would you choose us? Why would you buy from us? Why would you buy from me? It's not just to say, oh, I make these things and they're different, but it's just like, well, I'm going to tell you what's unique about my business, what's unique about
Yes.
the process, what's unique about the materials that we use, where the inspiration comes from, because I used to do this a lot when I first started out being full-time self-employed. I would look at other people and compare myself. And I'd be like, oh, I'm not as good as they are. And, they're doing really well. And then it actually turns out that they've recently admitted that they weren't doing well. It was just what they were showing on social media. But because I was doing this whole, oh, everyone's like doing better than me. And one of the things for me was, I think there was like a total wake-up moment. I was like, why am I doing this to myself? So now I just stay in my own lane. I keep my eye on what's going on around about me, what's trending, what's not, what my competitors are doing. But I stay in my own lane and I stay true to myself. And I think that really it really does help, especially when you're trying to be consistent and talk to your ideal audience. If you can just stay in your own lane and focus on you and what you're trying to achieve, that's probably another really like good tip. That's tip 4B. That's like a sideline tip. But I think if you can just really home in on that, it can be really powerful.
Yeah, and I think it can be really difficult. A lot of times, especially if you're starting out um, with the kind of creative life and giving up the full time job. We kind of hybrid it a little bit. So we might go part time with our job and do something
Mhm.
else. But we also can be, I know this, maybe I'm talking about myself really here. I can be like, I like to do this and I like to do that and I like to do the other. And it can be, quite difficult to have
Yes.
that. And in some ways, that's why I have like a lot of Instagram accounts. I have lots of different things going on because they are separate identities, as it were, with separate, I think it comes down to separate customers, like
Yes.
that I have, that I split that off. So I teach jewelry making, but I have a separate Instagram account for that compared to the Good Girl Rebellion, because I feel like
Yes.
they're very similar in a way, but they're also quite separate in terms of
Yes.
messaging. And I'm not saying you should create a million businesses like me. I start with one thing and grow one thing, because it's really hard to grow
Yeah.
multiple things at
Yeah.
the same time. So I'm not saying that, but I think that's, if that is where you're at, if your head's in the same place as me, where you're like, oh, I just love doing all of these different
Mhm.
things, it can be good to find a way to separate them out, but
Yeah.
also focus on one thing at a time, park
Yes.
the other thing is my
Yes.
tip.
I think about that this morning on my stories on Instagram about I've just launched that second business, and I was like, why did I not realise that this would take up all my time? So the NM Create stuff is kind of being a bit quiet because all my energy and time has went into the new one. And I'm like, once I get the footing for the new one, they'll just run alongside one another and it'll
Yeah,
be in a better place. But yeah, I'm a bit like yourself that way. Like I've got 10 million ideas and I've got about 15 Instagram accounts of ideas of things that I'm like, I'll revisit that. I'll do that again and I'll come back to this.
yeah,
But yeah, if you've got multiple things going on, solidify one thing first before moving on to the
yeah,
second. And NM Creates for me is in a place where there isn't much else that I would change on there apart from keeping it up to date and making sure that what I'm giving my clients is still something that they're looking for and that the drive is still there for it. So you're kind of, branding doesn't just stop, like it constantly evolves and it constantly grows. So you always kind of have to keep an eye on that. So yeah, do one thing before jumping on to another.
yeah. Kind of do as we say, not as we do.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I don't know. That was just a joke. Okay, what's our last thing? What's our
So the
fifth
last
tip?
one is to undervalue professional design. Now, I know that not everybody's in a position to hire a brand designer, but it should be at some point one of your goals to reach towards. So create a little pot on your bank account, put a little bit of money in it each month, and then when you have enough, hire someone, because attempting DIY branding can be okay. I have seen some really messy DIY branding, and it's the whole inconsistency, 5 different script fonts you can't read very well. It's just very messy. And if you use cheap, free, or generic, you're not the only person using it. So Canva logos have a place, for example, right? Take that as an example. But if you're using a logo on there, there'll be tens of thousands of people around the world also using it. You can't trademark it and you can't say to someone, well, I'm using that logo. It's kind of like, well, it's free use, so everybody can use it. So that kind of then starts messing with the unique point of difference.
Yeah,
So the way I see it is branding is it's your business's first impression. So in my opinion, and obviously I'm a bit biased here, but it's worth investing in the professional strategic design, because it is all strategy based and it's all going to be aimed at your ideal audience and what you're looking to put out there. So what I would suggest is that consider hiring a designer is not an expense as such, but it's an investment. Because if your professional branding can help you stand out and be the absolute number one choice, along with whatever marketing and copywriting you've got going on, you should see the return in the investment, because if you've got all these other things ticked off, you should be the standout person. So you should see that return coming in on the investment, because usually what you can find is you'll be able to increase your pricing. You'll be able to potentially put out an advert to a really niche audience to drive more traffic to your website, because you are bringing in more money. So you'll see how all of this starts to then connect. You can start with really key elements if the budget is tight. So, for example, on my website, I've got a couple of freebies that help people start to work on their brand foundations. I also sell a branding workshop, not workshop, sorry, a workbook. And everything we've talked about today is in that. You'll get lots of freebies. If you look on Pinterest and all that, there'll be lots of things you can work on with these things. So you don't have to actually spend money, but see if you can start working on your brand foundations. It will just open your eyes to a lot of the other stuff, and prioritize quality over quantity. So instead of rebranding, every 6 months, or changing your logo, or, like I was saying, 5 different fonts and making loads of confusing color choices, just make quality, good choices. And if you work with a brand designer, they should talk you through all these things, help you choose colors, select the right fonts, and always ensure, if you're working with a professional designer, that you're going to get a full file pack for your logo. So online files, print files, and that you know how to use all these files. Don't accept a flat JPEG, because you can't make that any size. It's not vectorized, which means that I can't take your vector that's this size and blow it up to the size of the room, and it won't lose resolution. It will still look really great. But if you have to DIY, think about what your competitors are doing, what they look like. Keep it simple. Go on the likes of Creative Market and have a look at fonts that maybe have a little bit of a quirk, and use that as your logo. Because if you're buying a font at, say, $15, it's going to make you stand out a bit more than it is using a free Canva logo. So that's just a couple of tips. And the thing is, all the things we spoke about today, they're not failures, they're not mistakes as such where, anyone's going to give you a bad rap, but they're opportunities for you to transform your business and making it strategic so that you can grow and scale it, which is what we
I think
want, really,
that's
isn't it?
such a good point. And I feel like investing, just generally investing in your business as early as you can,
Yeah.
with your branding. Like for me, for the Good Girl Rebellion, I was at a place where I was like, right, okay, I know where I'm at, I know who my customers are, I know, I know what's going on here, and I don't have the skill. I know this about myself. I don't have the skill to take that to that next level, but I do know someone who does. Nick did, right? And that is what you did. And I think, it can be the same with things like with jewelry. If you're selling online, a photographer,
Yeah.
really important. You may not want to invest in that camera and in that setup. I think a lot of times we try so hard to do everything ourselves, and to a certain extent in business we need to be able to do a lot of things ourselves.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely, but there are certain things that are going to be, like you said, they're an investment. They're
Yeah.
not a cost, they're an investment in who you are and your business, and they
Yeah.
will really properly up level your
Yes,
business.
100%. 100%. Yeah, brand photography, as probably says up there, like product photography. So I used to work in the photographic world, and they sold like very high end photographer type products. But the product photography for me as a graphic designer was absolutely key for making the adverts that we were putting out to stand out and really connect with the emotion that we wanted our customers to feel. So it was like a double done there. But see, having something generic to having something that's really lifestyle and captures a moment and captures a feeling, I cannot express how much of a difference it makes. And, it could be a studio setup, it could be your own little setup, but see if you just spend a little time figuring out how to take really good product photography, even if it's on your own phone, just get some of the equipment to make that happen. And again, I've recently hired an assistant to help me with NM Crates, and I cannot tell you how freeing it is to get rid of some of this stuff that I don't really do that well. And if you can do that with your creative stuff, and you can do that with your photography, but it makes your business stand out, it brings you in more sales, you'll see that return on investment again. So I suppose it is a bit about, investing smartly, like in a smart way, but for the bigger picture, not just to make it look nice. Has more underneath, more under the hood, more under the hood.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. You said so many different things there that I think are really going to help people out.
Hopefully,
How can people find you? Where can they find you on socials, and what's your website and all that?
So you'll find me on Facebook as NM Crates. My handle on Instagram is NM Crates with an underscore at the end of it. And my website is nmcrates.co.uk. All very simple, all very straightforward. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn as well. You just look for Nicola McMillan or NM Crates, and I should pop up on there. I've got a blog. It's got lots of tips and tricks on there. If you follow me on socials, there'll be no crazy hard sale things. I kind of talk quite real on there. I show people all the work that we do and give people lots of tips and stuff like that. I've also got free webinars. They'll be kicking back off again next month. And they're all about just sharing the knowledge with business owners, whether it's for business or for design, because I think that's really important, is to help other business owners step up. I want to see everyone succeed. I want to see everyone have a successful business, so I do what I can to share what I know as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'll share your freebie I'll share all of that in the show notes, but I'll also share that link to the freebie as well, because I think that would be really beneficial. Well, thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Jewelers Academy podcast, and we will see you again next week.